Okay, so think about this for a second. When you were a little kid, right, you were like a learning machine. Everything was new and exciting, and you just wanted to know everything. I bet you drove your parents crazy with a million why questions. But then at some point, learning often starts to feel different.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Like somewhere along the way, school and homework can make it feel less like that exciting adventure and more like, well, something you have to do, even if you don't want to.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to try and figure out today. Why does that happen?
Yeah.
What are the things that kind of steal that natural joy of learning that we all start with? Luckily, we've got some really interesting ideas from the stuff we read to help us unpack this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. We're really going to look at it from all angles.
Hmm.
What happens in the classroom itself, how kids experience learning at different ages, and then some of those bigger pressures that can come from the whole education system and even from society in general.
Right, so it's like a deep dive into all the reasons why a kid who starts out loving to learn can end up kind of dreading it. And the first thing that really jumps out from the reading is this idea that learning kind of goes through a transformation.
Yeah, a big one. Like, it shifts from being this awesome adventure to feeling more like a chore.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
when kids are little, their curiosity is like this superpower.
Yeah.
They're constantly trying things out, exploring, asking questions. Everything is hands-on discovery.
It's true. They're like little scientists always experimenting. A toddler who's taking apart a toy just to see how it works, or that little kid who keeps asking why about literally everything. That's pure learning, driven by their own need to know.
And it's so cool to watch. But then formal schooling starts, and suddenly things can change. Like all of a sudden that free-flowing exploration might get replaced with much more structured routines. And we see more worksheets, memorization tests. It's a whole different ballgame.
It is. Think about it. Instead of like building a tower as high as they can just because it's fun, now it's about filling in the right answers on a worksheet about somebody else's tower. And then you add in all the schedules and homework and the pressure of tests. And yeah, it's easy to see how learning can start to feel a lot less like a joy and a lot more like, well, just another thing on the to-do list.
A to-do list with a big fat grade attached to it.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another really important point, that the readings highlight the whole fear of failure thing.
Yeah, and this one is huge because it's so important for kids to understand that making mistakes is totally normal. Like, it's actually how we learn and grow.
But I think a lot of times that's not the message they get, is it? A bad grade, a big red mark on their work can feel so personal. It's like they didn't just get the answer wrong, they feel like they did something wrong.
Right. And when that keeps happening, when the focus is always on getting everything perfect and mistakes are seen as bad, it creates this whole mentality of, what if I get it wrong? So instead of being excited to try something new, they start to worry more about not messing up.
Which kind of makes them want to play it safe
Yes.
all the time
Right.
and avoid anything that might be challenging, because what if they don't get it right away? And that can really shut down all that natural curiosity and willingness to try new things that they had when they were little.
Absolutely. And I think the next point that our readings brought up really ties into this. It's the idea that there's no one right way to learn, which they called the one-size-fits-all problem.
It's so true, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, think about how you learn best. Some people are visual learners. They have to see things to understand them. Others learn by doing their hands-on. Some people are better at listening and remembering what they hear.
And all of that is totally normal. The readings actually talk about how our brains are wired differently when it comes to learning. Some are naturally more visual, some are more auditory, some are more kinesthetic. But traditional education often relies really heavily on these like lectures and textbooks.
Which might work great for some kids, but leave others feeling completely lost, right?
Yeah. And it's not because they're not smart. It's just that their brains learn in a different way. And if the teaching isn't meeting them where they are, they might start to think they're just bad at learning, which is so not true.
It's like, imagine if everyone had to run a race, but they could only wear one kind of shoe. Some people would do great, but others would be tripping all over the place, and they'd think they were terrible runners when really it was just the wrong shoes.
It's a great analogy. And to make things even more complicated, there's this trend of pushing academics down to younger and younger ages.
Right. The kindergarten is starting to look more like first or second grade used to.
Exactly. And when that happens, something really important gets squeezed out, and that's play.
Which is a huge bummer, because the readings really emphasize how crucial play is for learning. Like when kids play, they're exploring, experimenting, figuring out social skills, problem solving.
It's all happening through play. It's like their natural way of learning. But when we cut back on playtime to make room for more academics, even in those early years, we're actually taking away a really valuable learning tool.
And I think a lot of parents listening are probably nodding their heads right now because they see how stressed out their kids are getting with all this pressure to achieve. It's like they're not even little kids anymore. They're tiny
Yeah.
executives with packed schedules and performance goals.
It's true. And it can be really hard on them. Kids aren't designed to just sit still and absorb information for hours on end. They need that balance of pressure and play. Without it, learning can become a source of stress and even exhaustion, which is the opposite of what we want.
Totally. And then on top of all that, you have kids starting to ask that age-old question, why do I even need to learn this stuff?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. And it makes sense. If what they're learning feels totally irrelevant to their lives, like it has nothing to do with their interests or anything they experience outside of school, it's really hard to get excited about it.
Right. It's like, why should I spend all this time and energy on something that doesn't seem to matter to me at all? But on the flip side, when you can make that connection for them, when you show them how this stuff applies to the real world, when it taps into something they're already passionate about, that's when you see the light bulbs go on.
That's when learning clicks because it feels meaningful.
Yeah.
It's not just abstract concepts anymore. It's something that relates to their own world, and they can see why it matters.
Like suddenly they're not just learning about history.
Yeah.
They're uncovering secrets from the past. Or they're not just doing math problems. They're using math to design their own video game.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really important point from the readings, this idea of autonomy. You know, kids, like everyone else, need to feel like they have some control over their own lives. And when it comes to learning, feeling like they have a say can make a huge difference.
Because constantly being told what to learn, how to learn it, and when to learn it without any room for their own input, well, it can feel stifling.
For sure. Like, where's the space for their own questions, their own ways of exploring their own ideas? And when that happens, when they feel like they don't have a voice in their own education, it can really kill their motivation.
Yeah, they might start to feel like learning is something that's being done to them, not something they're a part of.
Exactly. But when we can create that sense of ownership, when we encourage their questions and give them opportunities to explore things they're interested in, that's when learning becomes truly engaging for them.
It's like they become active participants in their own learning instead of just passive recipients. And that can make a world of difference.
It really can. Now, in addition to these big picture things, the sources also point out some other factors that can contribute to negative attitudes toward learning.
Yeah, like struggling with certain subjects, which is totally understandable. If you just can't wrap your head around something, it can be super frustrating. Or maybe they just don't connect with the material or the way it's being taught.
Right. And then there's the homework. Overload, the stress of tests, all that pressure to perform can create so much anxiety around learning. And sometimes it's just the sheer volume of information.
Right. Like they're being bombarded with facts and figures, and it can feel overwhelming.
Exactly. And on top of all that, we have to consider the social and emotional side of things. Like if a kid is being bullied, or they have social anxiety, or they're struggling to fit in, all of that can create a really negative association with school in general.
And that can make it hard to enjoy learning, even if they're actually interested in the subjects themselves.
It's true. And of course, things going on at home, like family problems, or even just a tough relationship with a teacher, can also impact a child's attitude toward school and learning.
It's like all these different pieces of the puzzle can fit together to shape a child's experience.
Exactly. And the sources even went a bit deeper, talking about some systemic things that can contribute to this, like the lack of freedom in a very structured school day, the fact that kids have to wake up so early, which can make them chronically tired, the feeling the daily routine is just boring and repetitive.
It all plays a role. And then you add in things like perfectionism that pressure kids put on themselves to get everything right, which can lead to even more anxiety, especially when it's coupled with that fear of making mistakes.
Right. And then there's this disconnect between what they're learning in school and the skills they think they'll need in the real world. If they don't see how it all connects, it can feel pointless.
Totally. So basically what we're seeing here is that kids don't just decide one day that they hate learning. There are all these factors, these experiences, these pressures that can lead them to feel that way.
Exactly. And I think the really important takeaway here is that it's often the system, the environment, the way we approach learning that needs to be looked at more closely, not the child's inherent ability or desire to learn.
Absolutely. And the good news is that the sources actually offer some really great suggestions for how we can start to change things.
Like celebrating mistakes, making it clear that it's okay to get things wrong. That's how we learn and grow. And embracing the fact that everyone learns differently and providing different ways for kids to access information.
Right. Like maybe instead of just lectures and worksheets, we also have hands-on activities, group projects, visual aids, mix it up.
Totally. And making play a priority.
Right.
Recognizing that it's not just about fun, it's a crucial part of how kids learn and develop.
And finding ways to connect learning to the real world, showing kids how the things they're learning actually apply to their lives and to things they're interested in.
Absolutely. And maybe most importantly, giving kids a voice, letting them have some say in what they learn, how they learn it, and when they learn it.
Right. Because when they feel like they're a part of the process, when they have some ownership over their own education, it becomes much more meaningful and engaging for them.
Exactly. And I think for anyone listening, this whole deep dive brings up some really interesting questions to think about. Like, when did you feel that spark of curiosity the strongest when you were learning? And were there times when that enthusiasm faded? What caused that? And were there things that helped you rediscover that love of learning later on?
It's worth reflecting on those experiences both as individuals and as a society, because ultimately what we're talking about here is how to nurture that natural love of learning that we're all born with, and how to keep that spark alive throughout our lives.
It's a journey worth taking.